This is CBC Vancouver News.
The loss of a fallen firefighter.
She works hard. She just went to work. So this doesn't make sense.
Family and friends of Devin Gayle grapple with the death of the young BC wildfire fighter. Plus, court documents reveal criminal allegations against a former Surrey Police Service officer who took his own life, and texts he sent to a 15-year-old girl. And Hollywood on strike.
LA, New York, Vancouver, we're all in this together.
How the picket lines in LA are set to affect BC's film industry. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Janella Hamilton. Dan is away tonight. Tributes are pouring in from across the country for a BC firefighter who was killed while on duty yesterday just outside of Revelstoke. 19-year-old Devin Gayle died after being trapped under a falling tree. As Mirror Baines reports, her death is the fourth linked to BC wildfires in more than a decade.
Tributes are pouring in for Devin Gayle, pictured here on duty.
And if you look at all these words, this is what they did today when we were grieving her.
The 19-year-old's death has shaken the small community of Revelstoke where she grew up. Friends at a local gymnastics studio created a poster to remember what they loved most about her.
No one ever walked away from Devin without feeling just a little bit better.
Gayle's former gymnastics coach says the young wildfire fighter wanted to study to become a nurse.
She works hard. She just went to work. So this doesn't make sense. And it's really, really hard. And there's going to be a lot of people grieving this young lady because she was so beautiful, and she will be so, so missed in this community by so many people.
RCMP says she was clearing brush just outside Revelstoke where a small fire had broken out when her team says they lost contact with her.
This team of firefighters had discovered their teammate deceased nearby after losing contact with her. And it looked as though maybe a fallen tree had caused that.
She was airlifted to a local hospital where she was pronounced deceased. RCMP and WorkSafe BC are investigating, but police have said there is no evidence to suggest there was any criminal element to Gayle's death. Gayle was one of about 2,000 personnel battling more than 350 wildfires around the province, including 2 near Revelstoke, which are considered out of control. Her death has sparked condolences from across Canada.
This is a very, very sad day for our province and for all British Columbians, and I want to say thank you to her for her work, for her sacrifice, and to her family and friends.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called her death heartbreaking in a tweet this morning. Still, resources in BC are being taxed, with the province formally requesting more help.
There are currently 180 international folks in BC. We have an ask out for up to 1,000 additional, and we're working with our federal partners to bring in some more federal resources as well.
Meanwhile, the teen's brother, Nolan Gayle, posted a tribute to her and said she was an amazing sister, so kind and thoughtful and considerate. Her family has asked for privacy as they deal with her death. Mirror Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
Devin Gayle's friends and family remember her as a kind and selfless woman committed to protecting BC. Here's more from her former gymnastics coach.
She's so special and so wonderful. I just want everyone to know this is really hard. It makes no sense. It's just awful. It's tragic. It's just one of those horrible things. She didn't deserve this. She was just so good. I still am in disbelief. I think all of us are. It's just news you don't expect to hear. Devin's the good one. She's the safe one. She drives safely. She does good things. She makes good choices. She works hard. She just went to work. So this doesn't make sense. And it's really, really hard. And there's going to be a lot of people grieving this young lady because she was so beautiful, and she will be so, so missed in this community by so many people. And as an athlete, she turned up every day as a gritty, hardworking, fantastic teammate. She was always kind and looking out for the other girls and the other kids on her team. No matter what kind of hard day Devin was having, she made sure to check in on everybody else. When she graduated and she went off to university, she's off to nursing school, and I know nursing school would have led her to med school, and she was just, we all just knew she would be the best at whatever she did, because no matter what Devin did, she put 150% into it. She was gritty and hardworking and somehow noticed what everybody else needed, even when she was in the midst of like hard work. She'd always bring, anybody who needs anything. She's the thoughtful thank you note, caring, sweet, wise beyond her years young lady. No one ever walked away from Devin without feeling just a little bit better. She was so special. And I just feel so privileged to have spent as much time as I got to spend with her over the last decade.
An out-of-control wildfire that sparked at Pitt Lake along the shoreline on Grant Narrows around noon today is now being held and is not expected to grow. That according to BC Wildfire Service. Officials say thanks to reports from the public, 2 attack crews, including 1 helicopter and 2 air tankers, were able to respond to the fire before it grew too much. The aircraft helped reduce the fire's behavior, allowing ground crews to contain the blaze. The BC Centre for Disease Control is warning British Columbians to be on the lookout for poisonous death cap mushrooms after a young child ate part of one and required medical treatment. Experts say the mushrooms can be found in the Lower Mainland and in the Fraser Valley, as well as on Vancouver Island, but it's unusual to see them grow during such hot, dry weather.
One of the things that's contributing to that, though, is likely landscape irrigation, providing enough moisture for the mushrooms to actually start popping up.
Consumption of the death cap mushroom can cause severe illness and even death. In the case of a suspected poisoning, Dr. Lee advises to call the Poison Control Center as soon as possible. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was in Vancouver this morning and visited a local grocery store. Poilievre blamed the government for rising food prices, housing costs, and taxes. He also criticized Ottawa's response to the BC wildfires, saying it needs to send more resources.
We believe that the government in Ottawa, the federal government, needs to have a better coordinated approach to responding to forest fires, floods, and other natural disasters. We have resources scattered across the country that need to be coordinated and deployed more quickly so that places that have surplus resources can quickly make them available to places that are in desperate need to respond to a natural disaster.
More developments in the ongoing saga of the federal government's Online News Act. The BC government has dropped all of its advertising on Facebook and Instagram. Recently, Meta began blocking Canadian news from its social media platforms in retaliation to the new law, which requires digital platforms to pay for the use of Canadian news content. The provincial government says Meta's decision to cut news access to British Columbians was unacceptable, sending a strong message that journalism is a vital public service. CBC News has obtained new details about criminal allegations against a Surrey Police Service officer who died by suicide earlier this year. The redacted court documents were released by a provincial court judge after CBC challenged the sealing order. From those unsealed documents, CBC has learned 26-year-old Corporal Dylan Hotey, who died by suicide at this Langley gun range in February, had been under RCMP investigation for inappropriate text to a 15-year-old teenager he met while on the job. According to the documents, the teen went to the RCMP in August to report the text messages. Hotey was arrested and suspended on August 17th, but never criminally charged, and the allegations were never tested in court. Surrey RCMP confirmed it had recommended a charge against Hotey at the time of his death. However, it wasn't approved before he died. The Surrey Police Service declined to comment. An Abbotsford couple is desperately searching for a bone marrow donor to help treat their son's rare brain disease. The 7-year-old is currently being cared for at BC Children's Hospital. But as Sohrab Sandhu explains, the family is raising questions about how the disease is being treated in Canada.
How do you feel about having a bone marrow transplant?
scared.
In December 2020, Bowen Funk was diagnosed with adrenal leukodystrophy, also known as ALD. It's a rare genetic condition that damages the membrane in the brain and spinal cord, and which doctors say worsens over time.
Usually with just loss of intellectual ability, so more difficulties focusing, behavior problems, and things like that. So it's slow downward course until unfortunately the person dies of their condition.
While there's no known cure for ALD, medical experts say with an early diagnosis, there's a chance to prevent the disease from progressing. They also say that window of opportunity is very short.
Before they actually show enough signs that they've got it, but not too far along that the treatment won't work.
Some Canadians have previously been treated at the University of Minnesota, which specializes in bone marrow and stem cell transplants. The family, though, says that may be out of reach.
We've been given a rough estimate of $1.25 million. And because we're Canadian, not American, we'd have to pay for that up front. We don't know if the government would fund for us to go down there.
They've applied to MSP for out-of-country coverage, but don't know when they will hear back. In a statement to CBC, the Ministry of Health says treatment that is considered to be experimental or still in the developmental stage is not eligible for coverage. This Saskatchewan couple took their 4-year-old son to the university when he was diagnosed in 2021.
It's a very comprehensive process to apply for out-of-country coverage, and there's really no mechanism to make that happen quicker in circumstances where you're put in a place where you have to act now.
In their case, they convinced the province to reimburse them for payments made out of pocket. In the US, 37 out of 50 states are currently testing for ALD at the time of the birth. But in Canada, that's not the case.
And the cost of the test itself, I'd have to look up, but it's not horribly expensive. It's not more than anything else that gets screened by newborn screening.
Meanwhile, the Funk family hopes to find a bone marrow match here in BC.
Time is of the essence because his brain is continuing to deteriorate while we wait.
Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Vancouver.
To learn more about stem cell donations in BC, head to blood.ca. A man who drove a moose calf to rehabilitation center in his work vehicle has been fired for not following company protocol. The man says when he found the moose on a highway, there was a bear close by, and he did what he thought was best.
Where's Mom? Hey, where'd Mom go?
I noticed that calf moose on the opposite shoulder of the road all by itself. I pulled up kind of parallel with the moose calf, and like I said, as an outdoorsman, you scan the area, and I didn't see Mom around at all, and I'm well aware of leaving stuff alone and letting nature do its thing. As soon as I stopped and opened my door, she just comes trotting across the road and proceeds to try and get in the pickup truck.
Hang on, what am I gonna do for you? Where's Mom?
Looked up across the road, I just happened to glance over there. There was that black bear standing there. And so I scooted her over to the passenger side and stuck her in the truck. I believe that bear had been chasing probably her and her mom, and she just ran out of gas before her mom. I waited there for a little bit, thinking maybe Mom would stick her head out of the woods, make an appearance. Still never saw her. My next option is to get you some help. As soon as I got into service, I tried to call the conservation officer. I believe strongly enough that what I did was the right thing for that calf. I told everybody right from the start that I fully realize it is against the law to pick up wild animals off the road or from out in nature, anywhere. All that being said, if they had decided that my actions were somehow, nefarious and it was a bad call and they decided to charge me, that's fine. I would rather pay that fine or get in trouble and still knowing that in my heart that I did the right thing.
Okay, well, hang on. What am I gonna do for you? Where's Mom?
AFD Petroleum, meanwhile, is sharing its side of the story. In a statement, the company writes it has thorough human resources policies and procedures in place, in addition to protocols surrounding interactions with wildlife, and the former employee's actions breached those protocols. Instead of reporting the situation to a conservation officer and allowing the authorities to handle the rescue and relocation of the moose, the individual made the independent decision to transport an uninjured moose calf, a wild animal, in the front seat of his company vehicle for many hours. This not only put the employee and other road users at risk, but also potentially caused distress and harm to the moose.
They will absolutely happen here if it goes through in the States.
Hollywood actors have joined the picket lines walking beside writers. After the break, we'll look at what that means for Hollywood North and BC's film industry. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. With attendance on the decline, some churches are being repurposed for other uses. As Josepha Cameron tells us, one in Cape Breton has been given a second chance as a vibrant community hub.
In downtown Sydney, St. Andrew's United Church was repurposed as the Highland Arts Theatre. Wesley Colford came home for what they thought was going to be one theatre production, but ended up staying for 9 years.
Obviously, Cape Breton has such a long and cherished history of artists of all kinds, especially musicians, but storytellers, playwrights, dancers, all, you name it, visual artists. And for the performing arts, there hasn't really been a home, at least not in Sydney. So we've really been a sort of magnet for all of the incredible talent that exists throughout all of Cape Breton, but especially here in downtown.
Now, Colford says the church building is not only the host, but is almost a character in the theater community. With its grand neo-Gothic architecture and a 3,000-pipe organ, it is still standing strong. The renovation and repair costs have been millions of dollars, from fixing leaking pipes to replacing pews with theater seats. No easy feat, considering the theater relies on a pay-what-you-can model.
Everybody gets to come here and have an amazing experience, laugh, cry, be entertained, be moved, and ultimately leave together feeling a little bit more connected. And that's what churches have done for hundreds of years at their best of times. And that's what the theater does at its best of times as well.
Colford says the spirit of the church lives on, and some members of the congregation have even joined the theater's programming. Reverend Stephen Mills was the last full-time minister of St. Andrew's before it became the Hat. He says the church was seeing fewer and fewer congregants and less financial support.
Lots of memories for me of the people that were here, of the events that took place, and of the history. I'm a fan of history of churches, but also communities. So I'm kind of proud to be part of that history as well.
And do you miss it at all? Do you miss being a minister here?
Well, of course, yeah, I miss the people and just the venue. It's just a wonderful place to be in and to stand up and see the people out there. But I also welcome the change.
Hollywood actors are out on the picket lines today. The union that represents 160,000 performers in the U.S. walked off the job demanding better compensation and job protection, joining screenwriters who went on strike in May. But as Greg Ross explains, it's not just American productions that are affected by the labor action.
Toronto relies really heavily on the U.S. productions that come.
Jason Knight is the co-owner of a Toronto casting agency along with John Bucket. They say the film and television production industry already took a big hit when writers went on strike a couple of months ago. Now that the SAG-AFTRA union that represents actors voted to go on strike, things are expected to get far worse.
70% of our work comes from the U.S. So we are down already, just with the writer's strike, we're down 70%.
The cops get us! It's likely this strike could shut down many Canadian productions as well.
There are also some shows that are written by Canadians, but they have SAG actors in them. So they're now going to be affected. We haven't heard back from Murdoch yet.
They say the timing couldn't be worse.
Summer is our busiest production time for obvious reasons, and there's been a real dearth of shows coming and work opportunities, which of course affects everyone.
Canadian-based actors who rely on U.S. productions for work will now be left in limbo.
We're all just trying to make ends meet. A lot of us have been doing this for a long time, but because we are so passionate about this work, we're going to do everything we can to stay afloat until this thing rides out, however long it takes.
Just fine. Yep, perfect. But actors only make up a small percentage of the workforce that will be affected.
You're talking about, hair, makeup, wardrobe. You're talking about lighting crews, grips, ADs, accountants. You're turning off a major tap.
So I'm seeing a bit of this.
They say in all, tens of thousands of people will be impacted in some way.
Economically, it brings millions of dollars to just Toronto alone and all across Canada.
Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Earlier today, we spoke with Amari Newton, a professional actor from Vancouver and the head of Vancouver Film School's acting department. He explained some of the main issues at the heart of the actors' strike and how it impacts BC.
Core issues are looking at how streaming is going to impact the way actors are paid, specifically talking about residuals, and the emergence and the existential threat of artificial intelligence basically being able to use an actor's likeness and voice in perpetuity without their permission and without compensating them for using it. They will absolutely happen here if it goes through in the States. Vancouver is largely a service industry to LA, and we're very fortunate. We get a lot of film and TV productions down here from LA, so we will feel the effects very shortly after they feel it in the States.
Here we have a live shot of Harbour Centre. Darius Madavi will have your full forecast coming up next.
It's a day train enthusiasts have been waiting for years, the opening of the West Coast Railway Heritage Park.
It represents about $1.2 million of a $12 million plan that will result in a major tourist attraction built around a rail heritage theme.
This is just stage one of the Squamish Park. The West Coast Railway Association has gathered together vintage railway cars and locomotives that until now have been scattered across the Lower Mainland.
We believe that the railway played a fundamental role in opening Western Canada up, and indeed it was the very reason that British Columbia chose to join Confederation way back in the late 1800s. So telling that story, I think, is important for both present and future generations.
Train lovers from across the province have gathered for the opening, sporting headgear that anywhere else would seem out of place.
Well, I grew up with trains. Trains were the major transportation system in Canada. They were our way of getting around. My father never owned a car. So if we went any distance from home, it had to be by train.
Many people in the crowd worked the rails in earlier days, including one man who spent hours scrubbing dishes on the Mountaineer, a fancy CPR run from Vancouver to Minneapolis.
We would serve 150 people 3 times a day. So everybody who washes dishes for a small family would have an idea of what it's like.
Volunteer members of the West Coast Railway Association have spent thousands of hours doing restoration work. Their pride and joy is a former Canadian Pacific business car that's 104 years old. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, much of the nation's business transpired in cars like this. The West Coast Railway Association hopes this and other projects will be enough to draw train buffs to the park. The mayor of Squamish is also hopeful.
We have been and are a dependent community on the forest industry, and we need to diversify it, and this is the opportunity.
The Railway Association hopes to raise another $10 million over the next few years for interactive games for kids, train rides, and the creation of a 1930s-style community. They're hoping that will be enough to bring in lots of customers.
This is all Canada's history. And anybody who wants to learn about Canada's history has to deal with the railroad. That's the way it is.
Erica Johnson, CBC News, Squamish.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
CBC Vancouver is the premier media partner of the 2023 Surrey Fusion Festival, July 22nd and 23rd. Visit the festive cultural pavilions, enjoy free live music and family activities, and make sure you drop by the CBC tent for your chance to win CBC swag. And the Herb Original is a new CBC British Columbia podcast. Stream it today on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace, installing the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
All right, Darius, I know some parts of the province experienced thunderstorms today. Is that something that's going to be continuing around?
It does seem like it. And you're right, it seems like the Northeast can't catch a break. They've been seeing these same thunderstorms all week. You can see this high pressure ridge has also been strengthening, which is why we saw temperatures come up today. Looks like they're going to keep coming up through the weekend. And the new thing on this map, though, is this low pressure system off the coast. You can see these clouds swirling, and it looks like it's going to be bringing some rain to the north coast tomorrow. You can see that for Dease Lake, Terrace, Prince Rupert, all expected to see showers tomorrow. And to be honest, that's pretty good news considering how dry it's been through most of the province recently. Those thunderstorms, like I said, sticking around tomorrow in the northeast. And then really the story tomorrow is smoke. You can see Prince George, 21 tomorrow. That's entirely because there's so much smoke. It's just blocking that sun from coming down and warming up the area. The wind tomorrow still carrying that smoke down south. But if we move further west in the south, nothing but sun, really. That smoke not going to hit us here. If we zoom in on the lower mainland, we can see that that is the case. We're going to be seeing temperatures up to 30 everywhere from Hope to Whistler. But if you're closer to the water, as always, a bit cooler, mid-20s tomorrow in Vancouver. If we look ahead through the weekend, we can see that those temperatures are here to stay. Again, 30 further inland. But Monday, they really come down. We see drops back to seasonal as some rain moves in. And just like further north, we could really use it here as well. Unfortunately, short-lived. We see temperatures start to climb back up after those clouds pass through Monday night, and then nothing but a hot week ahead.
Wow, we can't seem to escape that heat. Thank you so much for all that, Darius.
Happy to be here.
That is your late news for this Friday. Thank you so much for watching. For news at any time, visit our website, cbc.ca/bc. Have a great night.